On the morning of March 27, 1995, inside the marble-floored entrance hall of Via Palestro 20 in Milan's most exclusive district, a man lay dying in a spreading pool of his own blood. The ornate bronze elevator doors stood open behind him, their polished surface reflecting the growing crimson stain that seeped across Italian marble worth more than most people's homes. 3 gunshot wounds had torn through his chest and neck, the bullets fired at close range by an assassin who had waited patiently in the shadows of one of Europe's most secure residential buildings. The victim was Maurizio Gucci, heir to a fashion empire that bore his family name, owner of a penthouse that occupied the entire top 2 floors of the building above, and target of a murder plot so methodically planned that it would shock even Milan's jaded society circles. At 54 years old, Maurizio had survived family betrayals, business wars, and personal scandals that would have destroyed lesser men. But he could not survive the woman who had once promised to love him until death parted them. The building superintendent, Giuseppe Onorato, discovered the body at 8:35 a.m. as he arrived for his morning shift. The sight that greeted him would haunt his dreams for years. Maurizio's body sprawled across marble that had been installed by Italian craftsmen at a cost of €50,000 per square meter, his expensive Hermes briefcase scattered beside him, its contents mixing with blood that pooled around architectural details hand-carved by Renaissance artisans. The irony was cruel. A man whose family had built an empire on beauty and luxury, dying surrounded by the very opulence that had defined his existence. The penthouse above where Maurizio fell had been his sanctuary, his fortress, his monument to the Gucci name that he had inherited and ultimately lost. Spread across 800 square meters of the building's top floors, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Milan's cathedral spires and alpine foothills. The interior was a masterpiece of Italian design. Venetian glass chandeliers, Persian rugs worth millions, furniture crafted by Europe's finest artisans, and walls lined with original paintings by Monet, Picasso, and de Chirico. But the penthouse had witnessed more than luxury and refinement. Within its walls, Maurizio had conducted the business meetings that would eventually destroy his family's company. He had planned the strategic moves that turned his relatives against him. Most fatally, he had fallen in love with another woman while married to Patrizia Reggiani, the social-climbing former waitress who would orchestrate his execution with the cold precision of a military operation. The murder weapon, a .38 caliber revolver, was never recovered, but police investigators would eventually trace the assassination to a conspiracy that reached from Milan's criminal underworld to the highest levels of Italian society. The mastermind was Patrizia herself, a woman whose obsession with wealth and status had transformed her from devoted wife into ruthless killer. Her motive was as old as human nature. If she could not have Maurizio Gucci, then no one could. The investigation would reveal a plot worthy of a Hollywood thriller. Hired killers recruited through Milanese fortune tellers, surveillance operations that tracked Maurizio's daily routines for months, and payment arrangements that used Swiss bank accounts and Caribbean shell companies to hide the financial trail. The woman who had once been known as Lady Gucci for her extravagant spending and social ambitions, had used the same attention to detail that characterized luxury fashion to plan her husband's destruction. Patrizia's relationship with Maurizio had begun as a fairy tale romance, the beautiful young woman from humble origins who captured the heart of Italy's most eligible bachelor. Their 1972 wedding was the social event of the decade, attended by European royalty, international celebrities, and the titans of Italian industry. The penthouse on Via Palestro became their love nest, a private world where 2 young people could escape the pressures of family expectations and business obligations. But fairy tales, as the Grimm brothers understood, often contain darkness that surfaces only when it is too late to escape. Patrizia's love for Maurizio was inseparable from her love for the Gucci name, the Gucci fortune, and the social status that marriage had provided. When Maurizio's business decisions threatened that fortune, when his personal choices threatened her status, when his romantic betrayals threatened her identity, Patrizia's love curdled into something far more dangerous. The penthouse where they had once planned their future together became the stage for a Greek tragedy played out in Italian marble and Persian silk. The same rooms where they had entertained Europe's elite witnessed bitter arguments about money, family loyalty, and romantic betrayal. The bedroom where they had conceived 2 daughters became the setting for confrontations that grew increasingly violent as Maurizio's marriage disintegrated along with his business empire. The building's other residents, wealthy industrialists, foreign diplomats, and international celebrities, had grown accustomed to raised voices echoing from the Gucci penthouse during Maurizio and Patrizia's final years together. The doormen learned to ignore expensive objects being thrown against walls. The housekeeping staff became experts at repairing damage from domestic disputes, and the neighbors developed selective hearing when police were called to investigate noise complaints. Yet none of them imagined that the deteriorating marriage would culminate in premeditated murder, planned with the same meticulous attention to quality and detail that had built the Gucci empire itself. The woman who had once been celebrated for her impeccable taste in fashion and interior design applied those same aesthetic sensibilities to arranging her husband's assassination. But to understand how a love story that began in the penthouse of Via Palestro 20 ended with blood on its marble floors, we must travel back to a different time and place. Back to post-war Milan, where a young man named Maurizio Gucci first learned that inheriting a great name could be both blessing and curse, and where the seeds of his destruction were planted in the very soil of his family's success. Golden Era. The story of Via Palestro 20's tragedy begins not with murder, but with the birth of a child who seemed destined for nothing but privilege and success. Maurizio Gucci entered the world on September 26, 1948, in a private clinic overlooking Milan's Navigli canals, delivered by Italy's most expensive obstetrician into the arms of a family that had transformed leather craftsmanship into international luxury. His father, Rodolfo Gucci, was already a minor film star turned successful businessman. His grandfather, Guccio Gucci, was the legendary founder, whose vision had elevated a small Florentine leather goods shop into a symbol of Italian elegance recognized across Europe. The Italy of Maurizio's birth was a country rebuilding itself from the ashes of war, but the Gucci family had emerged from the conflict stronger than ever. While other luxury businesses struggled to recover from years of rationing and economic disruption, Gucci's reputation for quality had actually been enhanced by wartime scarcity. Wealthy customers who had been forced to make do with inferior products during the war were eager to return to the craftsmanship and elegance that the Gucci name represented. Maurizio's earliest memories were of the flagship store on Via Tornabuoni in Florence, where his grandfather Guccio would lift him onto the polished wooden counter and explain the difference between genuine leather and inferior substitutes. "Feel the grain," the old man would say, guiding Maurizio's small fingers across samples of cowhide, crocodile, and ostrich skin. Luxury is not about price, it is about perfection in every detail. These lessons in quality and craftsmanship would shape Maurizio's understanding of the family business, but they would also instill expectations of perfection that would prove impossible to maintain. The Gucci family lived like Italian nobility, dividing their time between a Renaissance palazzo in Florence, a villa on the shores of Lake Como, and a townhouse in Milan's Brera district. Maurizio's childhood was filled with private tutors, European vacations, and social events attended by Italy's cultural and business elite. His playmates included the children of Fiat executives, Milanese bankers, and even minor royalty from Europe's surviving monarchies. But privilege came with expectations that weighed heavily on a sensitive child. As the only son of Rodolfo Gucci and grandson of the company founder, Maurizio understood from an early age that he was expected to carry forward a legacy that employed thousands of craftsmen and defined Italian luxury for the world. Family dinners became informal business meetings where 3 generations of Gucci men discussed expansion strategies, quality control, and the delicate balance between tradition and innovation that kept the brand relevant. Maurizio's education reflected his family's ambitions for his future role in the business. He attended Switzerland's most exclusive boarding schools, where he studied alongside the sons of international industrialists and learned to speak fluent French, German, and English, in addition to his native Italian. Summer vacations were spent working in Gucci factories and retail stores, learning every aspect of the business from leather selection to customer service. By age 16, he could identify the origin of any piece of leather by touch and evaluate the quality of hand-stitching with the expertise of a master craftsman. The transformation from privileged child to serious heir accelerated during Maurizio's university years at Bocconi University in Milan, where he studied business administration with a focus on international commerce. His thesis project examined the challenges facing European luxury brands in expanding to American markets, research that proved prescient as Gucci's U.S. operations would become crucial to the company's future growth. His professors remembered him as intelligent but not brilliant, hardworking but not obsessive, and possessed of the quiet confidence that came from knowing his future was secure. But security bred restlessness in a young man who had never faced genuine challenges or setbacks. While his classmates worried about career prospects and student loans, Maurizio knew that a position at Gucci awaited him regardless of his academic performance. This knowledge freed him to pursue interests beyond business. He developed passions for contemporary art, classical music, and automobile racing that would define his personal style throughout his life. The cultural sophistication that distinguished Maurizio from typical businessmen also revealed an aesthetic sensibility that sometimes conflicted with commercial reality. He preferred avant-garde fashion designs that pushed creative boundaries over safer products that guaranteed sales. He was drawn to risky marketing concepts that elevated Gucci's artistic reputation, even when they confused traditional customers. These tendencies would serve him well during periods of creative innovation, but would prove disastrous when business conditions required practical compromise. Maurizio's relationship with his father Rodolfo was complicated by the older man's frustration with his son's lack of commercial ruthlessness. Rodolfo had fought bitter battles with his own brothers Aldo and Vasco for control of the family business, emerging victorious through a combination of strategic cunning and willingness to sacrifice family relationships for corporate advantage. He expected Maurizio to demonstrate similar toughness in defending his inheritance against rivals both within and outside the Gucci family. But Maurizio possessed neither his father's paranoia nor his appetite for conflict. Where Rodolfo saw potential threats requiring aggressive response, Maurizio saw opportunities for collaboration and compromise. Where Rodolfo demanded absolute loyalty from employees and family members, Maurizio preferred to earn respect through competence and fairness. These differences in temperament would prove crucial during the family conflicts that would eventually tear apart both the Gucci business and the Gucci family itself. The young man's romantic nature found its perfect expression in his relationship with art and culture. Maurizio became a serious collector of contemporary Italian paintings, developing relationships with gallery owners, critics, and artists that introduced him to Milan's creative community. His appreciation for beauty extended beyond visual arts to include interior design, architecture, and fashion that transcended mere commercial appeal. This aesthetic sophistication would later manifest itself in the penthouse on Via Palestro, which Maurizio would transform into a showcase of Italian artistic achievement. But aesthetic sensitivity also made Maurizio vulnerable to manipulation by those who understood how to appeal to his appreciation for beauty and culture. His tendency to trust people based on their artistic sophistication rather than their business acumen would repeatedly place him in relationships with individuals whose motives were far more mercenary than his own. The same qualities that made him an appealing companion and generous patron would eventually make him an easy target for those who understood how to exploit his romantic idealism. Military service, mandatory for Italian men of his generation, provided Maurizio's only exposure to life outside the protective bubble of family wealth and social privilege. Assigned to an artillery unit in northern Italy, he spent 18 months learning military discipline and forming friendships with young men from working-class backgrounds who knew nothing of luxury fashion or international business. The experience humbled him in ways that no amount of family lecturing could have achieved, teaching him to value competence over pedigree and honesty over sophistication. His fellow soldiers remembered Maurizio as surprisingly down-to-earth despite his privileged background, willing to share family care packages, and genuinely interested in their stories about growing up in Italy's industrial cities and rural towns. The nickname his unit gave him, Principe, Prince, was affectionate rather than mocking, reflecting their recognition that he treated them with respect despite the obvious differences in their backgrounds. When Maurizio completed his military service in 1971, he returned to Milan fundamentally changed by his exposure to ordinary Italian life. The young man who had grown up surrounded by luxury and privilege now understood that the Gucci name meant nothing to people struggling with unemployment, inflation, and the social tensions that were transforming Italian society. This awareness would influence his later business decisions, as he pushed Gucci to develop products that appealed to younger, less traditional customers who valued style over status symbols. But Maurizio's new social consciousness also made him more susceptible to romantic idealism about people and relationships. Having discovered that authentic human connections were more satisfying than the superficial social interactions of his privileged upbringing, he began seeking relationships based on emotional depth rather than social advantage. This search for authentic love would lead him to Patrizia Reggiani, the beautiful young woman whose own hunger for social advancement would perfectly complement his desire for genuine human connection. The stage was set for a romance that would begin as a fairy tale and end as a Greek tragedy, played out in the penthouse that would become both sanctuary and trap for the golden heir who had everything except the wisdom to protect himself from those who coveted what he had inherited. Family business. In 1972, when Maurizio Gucci officially joined the family business as assistant to the managing director, the company that bore his name was approaching its zenith as a symbol of Italian luxury and international sophistication. The flagship store on Via Monte Napoleone in Milan had become a pilgrimage destination for wealthy women from across Europe and America, while Gucci's expansion into Paris, London, and New York had established the brand as the first truly global luxury fashion house. The company employed over 2,500 craftsmen in workshops scattered across Tuscany and Lombardy, each one a master of techniques passed down through generations of Italian leather workers. But success had bred the kind of family conflicts that Italian newspapers covered with the same attention they devoted to political scandals and celebrity divorces. The Gucci family had fractured into competing factions, each claiming to represent the true vision of patriarch Guccio Gucci, while pursuing strategies that served their own financial and personal interests. Maurizio's father, Rodolfo, controlled the company's European operations from his base in Milan, while Uncle Aldo dominated American markets from New York offices that rivaled corporate headquarters in their scope and influence. The atmosphere at family board meetings had grown poisonous by the early 1970s, with accusations of financial impropriety, strategic incompetence, and personal betrayal regularly exchanged between brothers who had once worked together to build their father's vision into an international empire. Maurizio's introduction to this environment was a shock that no amount of elite education or cultural sophistication could have prepared him for. The aesthetic refinement and artistic sensibility that characterized Gucci products disappeared entirely when family members gathered to discuss business strategy and profit distribution. Maurizio's initial responsibilities were deliberately limited by his father's determination to protect him from the worst aspects of family infighting, while gradually introducing him to the complexities of luxury business management. He was assigned to oversee product development for leather goods, working directly with master craftsmen in Florentine workshops to ensure that new designs met the quality standards that had built the Gucci reputation. The work appealed to his aesthetic sensibilities, while teaching him the practical requirements of maintaining excellence in mass production. The young heir quickly distinguished himself through his ability to bridge the gap between traditional craftsmanship and contemporary design innovation. While older family members remained committed to conservative styles that had proven commercially successful, Maurizio championed experimental approaches that incorporated influences from contemporary art, architecture, and youth culture. His proposals for new product lines often sparked heated family debates, but they also generated some of Gucci's most successful designs during the mid-1970s. His breakthrough moment came with the development of what would become known as the Maurizio Collection, a line of handbags and accessories that combined traditional Gucci leather craftsmanship with hardware and color schemes inspired by the pop art movement that was transforming Italian visual culture. The collection's success with younger, more affluent customers demonstrated Maurizio's understanding of how luxury markets were evolving beyond their traditional customer base of established wealth and conservative taste. But commercial success also intensified family tensions by validating Maurizio's belief that Gucci needed to embrace creative risk-taking over the safe incrementalism that had characterized the company's approach under his uncle Aldo's conservative leadership. Board meetings became battlegrounds where artistic vision collided with financial pragmatism, where generational differences were expressed through arguments about product strategy and marketing philosophy. The conflict reached crisis levels in 1975, when Maurizio proposed opening a Gucci gallery in Milan that would showcase contemporary Italian art alongside the company's luxury products. The concept reflected his conviction that fashion and art were inseparable expressions of Italian creative culture, but it also represented exactly the kind of expensive experiment that more commercially minded family members viewed with suspicion and alarm. Uncle Aldo dismissed the proposal as aesthetic self-indulgence that wastes money on customers who buy art instead of handbags. The gallery project became a proxy war for broader questions about Gucci's future direction and leadership structure. Maurizio's supporters argued that luxury brands needed to develop cultural credibility to maintain relevance with sophisticated international customers. His opponents contended that the company's success depended on maintaining focus on PR, profitable product development, rather than pursuing expensive artistic ambitions that distracted from core business activities. The resolution came through a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but prevented open family warfare. Maurizio would be allowed to open his gallery, but it would be privately funded through his personal inheritance rather than corporate resources. The arrangement established a pattern of family accommodation that allowed different factions to pursue competing visions while maintaining the appearance of unified leadership. But it also created precedents for pursuing personal projects that would later prove devastating when applied to larger business decisions. The Gucci Gallery opened in November 1975 in a renovated Renaissance palace near La Scala Opera House, featuring rotating exhibitions of contemporary Italian artists, alongside displays of historical Gucci products presented as examples of decorative art. The opening reception attracted Milan's cultural elite and international fashion press, generating exactly the kind of sophisticated publicity that enhanced Gucci's reputation among affluent customers who valued cultural sophistication over mere material luxury. But the gallery also introduced Maurizio to Milan's social and cultural scene in ways that would prove fatally consequential. The exhibition openings, charity galas, and cultural events that he hosted brought him into contact with a broader range of people than he had previously encountered in his sheltered family environment. Among the beautiful young women who attended these sophisticated gatherings was Patrizia Martinelli, a striking brunette who worked as a waitress at exclusive Milan restaurants while nurturing ambitions for social advancement. Patrizia's presence at cultural events that required expensive formal clothing and sophisticated conversation skills should have raised questions about how a restaurant employee could afford such lifestyle elements. But Maurizio's romantic idealism prevented him from recognizing the calculation behind her carefully cultivated appearance of effortless elegance. He saw a beautiful young woman who appreciated art and culture, not a determined social climber who had identified him as the perfect vehicle for achieving the wealth and status she craved. Their courtship developed against the backdrop of Milan's most exclusive social settings: gallery openings, opera premieres, charity balls, and private parties attended by Italian aristocracy and international celebrities. Patrizia's beauty and apparent cultural sophistication made her a welcome addition to these gatherings, while her humble background added an element of democratic romance that appealed to liberal sensibilities fashionable among Milan's cultural elite during the socially conscious 1970s. Maurizio's family initially welcomed Patrizia as evidence that their son was developing the kind of serious romantic relationship that would stabilize his personal life and strengthen his commitment to family business responsibilities. Her intelligence and social grace made her an asset at company events, while her obvious devotion to Maurizio suggested that marriage would provide the emotional grounding he needed to fulfill his destiny as heir to the Gucci empire. But family approval was based on incomplete understanding of Patrizia's background and motivations. The woman who presented herself as a cultured young professional from a respectable middle-class family was actually the daughter of a truck driver who had used her remarkable beauty and ruthless ambition to escape the economic limitations of her birth. Her appreciation for luxury and sophisticated social environments was not the result of educated taste, but of careful observation and determined self-improvement designed to qualify her for marriage into Italy's wealthy elite. The deception was not malicious in its origins. Patrizia genuinely believed that she could make Maurizio happy while achieving the social advancement that her beauty and intelligence deserved. But it established patterns of concealment and manipulation that would eventually metastasize into something far more dangerous when the fairy tale romance collided with the realities of family conflict and business pressure. As Maurizio's relationship with Patrizia deepened throughout 1976 and 1977, his involvement in family business operations expanded to include strategic planning and international expansion. His success with the Maurizio collection had earned him credibility with both family members and professional managers, while his cultural connections provided valuable insights into changing consumer preferences among affluent younger customers who would define luxury markets in coming decades. But success also made him a target for family factions, who viewed his growing influence as a threat to their own positions within the company hierarchy. The same aesthetic sensibilities and creative instincts that had generated commercial success also made him vulnerable to criticism, that he was more interested in artistic expression than practical business management. Uncle Aldo's supporters began questioning whether Maurizio possessed the ruthless decision-making skills necessary to lead a global luxury business in increasingly competitive international markets. The stage was set for family conflicts that would tear apart both the Gucci business and the Gucci family itself. The young heir, who had entered the company with idealistic hopes of combining commercial success with artistic achievement, was about to discover that family business could be more dangerous than family war. Penthouse dreams. The penthouse at Via Palestro 20 entered Maurizio and Patrizia's lives in 1978 as the physical manifestation of their fairy tale romance. The 800-square-meter duplex occupied the 8th and 9th floors of Milan's most prestigious residential building, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views across the city's cathedral spires to the snow-capped Alps beyond. When Maurizio signed the purchase contract for 850 million lire, equivalent to nearly $3 million in contemporary currency, he was acquiring more than luxury real estate. He was purchasing a stage where he and Patrizia could perform the roles of Italy's golden couple for an audience of international society. The building itself represented the pinnacle of Milanese residential architecture, designed in 1965 by architect Luigi Mordi as a modernist interpretation of Renaissance palace traditions. The exterior facade combined travertine marble with bronze detailing that caught afternoon sunlight and reflected it across the surrounding streets. The entrance lobby featured hand-painted ceiling frescoes by contemporary Italian masters, while the elevator system used Swiss precision engineering that operated with the silence of a luxury automobile. But the penthouse that Maurizio and Patrizia inherited required complete renovation to transform it from mere luxury accommodation into a reflection of their personal aesthetic vision. The previous owner, an elderly industrialist, had decorated the space with heavy furniture and dark colors that reflected traditional Italian taste, but ignored contemporary design innovations that were transforming international luxury residential style. Maurizio and Patrizia approached the renovation with the same attention to detail and commitment to perfection that characterized Gucci's approach to leather craftsmanship. The project consumed 18 months and cost over 2 billion lire, as every surface, fixture, and detail was customized to create an environment that combined Italian artistic heritage with contemporary luxury living. Patrizia revealed remarkable talent for interior design, coordinating colors, textures, and lighting with the instinctive sophistication of a professional decorator. Her choices reflected extensive research into art history, architecture, and decorative arts that demonstrated intellectual curiosity beyond mere social ambition. The main living area became a showcase of contemporary Italian design, featuring furniture by Carlo Scarpa, Eder Satzes, and other masters of post-war modernism. Persian rugs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars defined intimate conversation areas within the larger space, while carefully positioned contemporary paintings created visual focal points that drew the eye toward spectacular city views. The overall effect was sophisticated without being intimidating, luxurious without being ostentatious. The master bedroom occupied the penthouse's most private corner, with wraparound windows that could be opened to create an outdoor terrace overlooking Milan's historic center. Patrizia's design combined sensuous fabrics, Italian silk, French velvet, Egyptian cotton, with lighting systems that could be adjusted to create different moods throughout the day. The adjoining bathroom featured marble quarried from the same Carrara mountains that had provided stone for Michelangelo's sculptures, while fixtures included gold-plated hardware, designed exclusively for the penthouse by Milanese craftsmen. But the penthouse's most spectacular feature was the rooftop terrace that Patrizia transformed into a private garden paradise. Working with landscape architects who had designed gardens for European royalty, she created an outdoor environment that combined formal Italian garden traditions with exotic plants that could survive Milan's continental climate. The terrace included a swimming pool, outdoor kitchen, and seating areas that could accommodate intimate dinners or larger social gatherings. The completed penthouse became the setting for a social life that established Maurizio and Patrizia as leaders of Milan's cultural and business elite. Their dinner parties attracted guests who included fashion designers, contemporary artists, opera singers, film directors, and business leaders from across Europe. The combination of Maurizio's family connections, Patrizia's social skills, and the penthouse's spectacular setting made their invitations among the most coveted in Italian society. Patrizia proved to be a gifted hostess whose attention to detail rivaled the standards of professional event planners. Her dinner parties featured menus developed in collaboration with Milan's most celebrated chefs, floral arrangements that changed seasonally to complement the terrace garden's blooming cycles, and entertainment that might include private performances by La Scala opera stars or contemporary musicians. The expense was enormous. Individual dinner parties could cost more than most Italians earned in a year, but the social and business benefits justified the investment. The penthouse also became the setting for Maurizio's growing involvement in Milan's contemporary art scene, as the couple used their spectacular space to host private exhibitions and charity fundraisers for Italian museums and cultural institutions. Patrizia's sophisticated understanding of art history and her natural ability to connect with creative personalities made these events both financially successful and culturally significant. Their support for young Italian artists provided crucial early career assistance while enhancing the couple's reputation as cultural patrons. But the penthouse's role as a social stage also revealed the increasing complexity of Maurizio and Patrizia's relationship. While they appeared perfectly matched when entertaining guests or attending public events, their private interactions were increasingly strained by pressures that arose from their different backgrounds and conflicting expectations about family roles and business responsibilities. Patrizia had married expecting to enjoy the luxury that Gucci wealth could provide, but she had not anticipated the family conflicts and business pressures that came with her husband's inheritance. The birth of their first daughter, Alessandra, in 1977, and their second daughter, Allegra, in 1981, should have provided stability and common purpose that strengthened their marriage. The penthouse was redesigned to include nursery areas, children's play spaces, and family rooms that accommodated the needs of a growing family, while maintaining the sophisticated aesthetic that had made the residence famous throughout European society circles. Maurizio proved to be a devoted father who delighted in introducing his daughters to the art, music, and culture that surrounded their privileged upbringing. Weekend mornings in the penthouse often featured family breakfast sessions where he would play classical music and explain the artistic significance of paintings that decorated their home. His gentle nature and intellectual curiosity made him an ideal parent for children growing up in an environment of exceptional cultural sophistication. But fatherhood also intensified his awareness of the responsibilities that came with his inheritance and the importance of ensuring that the Gucci legacy would survive to benefit future generations. This growing sense of duty created tensions with Patrizia's more immediate concerns about social status, financial security, and personal happiness. Their discussions about family planning, business strategy, and lifestyle choices became increasingly contentious as different priorities competed for attention. The penthouse witnessed the gradual erosion of romantic intimacy that had initially bonded Maurizio and Patrizia despite their different backgrounds. The same space that had been their love nest during the early years of marriage became a stage for arguments about money, family obligations, and personal freedom that grew more bitter as their fundamental incompatibilities became apparent. The beautiful rooms that had hosted sophisticated dinner parties now echoed with raised voices and accusations that reflected deeper problems in their relationship. Financial pressures added another layer of stress to their domestic life. While the Gucci name provided social prestige and business opportunities, the family conflicts that were tearing apart the company also threatened the income stream that supported their luxurious lifestyle. Maurizio's position within the family business was increasingly precarious as Uncle Aldo and Cousin Paolo pursued strategies that marginalized Rodolfo's branch of the family tree. The penthouse that had been purchased as a symbol of their successful marriage was gradually transforming into a prison where two people who had once loved each other were trapped by social expectations, financial obligations, and the momentum of a lifestyle that had become too expensive and complex to abandon. The fairy tale romance that had begun with such promise was revealing its darker undertones as external pressures tested the foundations of their relationship. By 1982, the penthouse on Via Palestro had become both sanctuary and battleground for a marriage that was struggling to survive the realities of family business conflicts, social pressures, and the gradual recognition that love alone could not bridge the fundamental differences in values and expectations that had always existed between Maurizio and Patrizia. The stage was set for the tragedy that would unfold over the next 13 years, as the penthouse that had been built to celebrate their love would ultimately witness its destruction. Marriage trap. The early 1980s should have been the golden years for Maurizio and Patrizia Gucci. Their daughters were healthy and beautiful, their social position was secure among Milan's elite, and the penthouse on Via Palestro had become a showcase of Italian luxury that was featured in international design magazines and society publications. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, fundamental cracks were spreading through their marriage with the slow persistence of structural damage that would eventually bring down the entire edifice they had constructed together. Patrizia's transformation from grateful social climber to entitled aristocrat had accelerated during the first decade of their marriage, as she grew accustomed to a level of luxury that most people could barely imagine. Her daily routine included personal shoppers at Milan's most exclusive boutiques, private fitness trainers, beauty specialists who traveled to the penthouse for weekly appointments, and domestic staff who anticipated her needs with the precision of Swiss clockwork. The woman who had once worked as a waitress in Milanese restaurants now spent more on monthly beauty treatments than she had previously earned in an entire year. But privilege bred expectations that proved impossible to satisfy, as each new luxury created demands for even greater extravagance. Patrizia's shopping expeditions to Paris and London became monthly pilgrimages that cost tens of thousands of dollars and filled the penthouse with clothing, jewelry, and decorative objects that were admired briefly before being replaced by newer acquisitions. Her social calendar expanded to include charity galas, fashion shows, and cultural events that required constant wardrobe updates and entertainment expenses that would have supported multiple families in comfort. Maurizio initially indulged his wife's extravagance as evidence of his success, in providing for his family and maintaining the Gucci reputation for luxury living. But Patrizia's spending patterns began to strain even the considerable resources available to a Gucci heir, particularly as family business conflicts reduced his control over company finances and threatened his access to the wealth that supported their lifestyle. Financial discussions between husband and wife became increasingly tense as Patrizia's assumptions about unlimited spending collided with practical limitations imposed by business realities. The tension was exacerbated by Patrizia's growing involvement in family business affairs, where her lack of formal education and business experience created friction with professional managers and family members who questioned her qualifications to influence corporate strategy. Her beauty and social skills were assets in entertaining clients and maintaining relationships with important customers, but they did not translate into credible expertise in financial planning, product development, or international expansion strategies. Patrizia's frustration with being excluded from business decision-making manifested itself in increasingly aggressive attempts to influence Maurizio's choices about family relationships and corporate alliances. She viewed his uncle Aldo as a threat to their financial security and pressured Maurizio to adopt more confrontational strategies in defending his inheritance against competing family claims. Her advice often reflected personal animosity rather than sound business judgment, creating additional complications in family relationships that were already strained to the breaking point. The birth of their second daughter, Allegra, in 1980, one should have provided renewed focus on family priorities and common goals, but it instead highlighted the growing differences in Maurizio and Patrizia's approaches to parenting and family responsibility. Maurizio wanted to raise his daughters with appreciation for culture, education, and social responsibility, while Patrizia was more concerned with ensuring that they would inherit the social status and financial security that she had worked so hard to achieve through marriage. Their disagreements about children's education reflected deeper conflicts about values and priorities. Maurizio preferred progressive approaches that emphasized creativity and intellectual development, while Patrizia favored traditional methods that would prepare their daughters for lives as wealthy socialites. The penthouse became a battleground where competing philosophies of child-rearing were expressed through arguments about schooling, social activities, and exposure to different economic classes. The isolation of extreme wealth also took its toll on their marriage, as the penthouse's luxury gradually separated them from normal human experiences and relationships. Their social circle consisted entirely of other wealthy families whose problems and perspectives were limited by similar privilege, creating an echo chamber where superficial concerns about status and material possessions overshadowed more fundamental questions about meaning and purpose. Neither Maurizio nor Patrizia maintained friendships with people from their earlier lives who might have provided perspective on how their marriage was deteriorating. Maurizio's growing awareness of his isolation manifested itself in increased interest in cultural activities and charitable causes that brought him into contact with artists, intellectuals, and social activists whose lives were not defined by material accumulation. His involvement with contemporary art galleries, university programs, and cultural foundations provided glimpses of alternative ways of living that made his own existence seem increasingly shallow and constrained. But Patrizia interpreted his cultural interests as rejection of the lifestyle she had worked so hard to achieve and protection of their social position required. She viewed his charitable giving as wasteful spending that reduced resources available for their own family's security, while his friendships with artists and intellectuals threatened the exclusive social environment she had cultivated among Milan's wealthy elite. Her attempts to limit his cultural activities created resentment that poisoned their interactions about other subjects. The penthouse itself became a symbol of their marital problems, as the space that had been designed to bring them together increasingly highlighted their incompatibility. The formal rooms that had been perfect for entertaining guests felt cold and unwelcoming during private family moments, while the spectacular views and luxurious furnishings seemed to mock the emotional emptiness that had developed between husband and wife. The same aesthetic perfection that impressed visitors served as a constant reminder of how their relationship had become more about appearance than substance. Physical intimacy declined as emotional distance increased, with Maurizio and Patrizia gradually developing separate schedules and interests that minimized time spent alone together. The master bedroom, with its romantic design and panoramic views, became merely a shared sleeping space, while the penthouse's multiple living areas allowed them to coexist without meaningful interaction. They maintained the appearance of a happy marriage for public consumption, while privately acknowledging that their relationship had become a business partnership, focused on protecting their daughter's inheritance and maintaining their social position. The final blow to their marriage came through Maurizio's involvement in family business conflicts that ultimately forced him to choose between loyalty to Patrizia and loyalty to his father Rodolfo. When Uncle Aldo's machinations threatened Rodolfo's control over the European operations, Maurizio was forced to take sides in a battle that would determine not only his own inheritance, but the future direction of the entire Gucci empire. His decision to support his father's faction against Aldo's American branch created enemies within the family who would eventually find ways to exploit his marital problems for their own advantage. Patrizia's reaction to these family conflicts revealed the calculating nature that had always lurked beneath her romantic facade. Rather than supporting her husband through a difficult period, she began hedging her bets by cultivating relationships with family members who might protect her interests if Maurizio's position within the company was compromised. Her strategic thinking about family politics showed impressive sophistication, but also demonstrated that her loyalty to their marriage was subordinate to her concern about maintaining her lifestyle and social position. By 1984, the penthouse that had been purchased as a symbol of their successful romance had become a museum of their failed marriage. Beautiful but cold, impressive but lifeless. The couple who had once been celebrated as Italy's golden pair were now trapped in a relationship that neither could abandon without devastating social and financial consequences. The stage was set for the final act of their domestic tragedy, as external pressures and internal conflicts combined to transform love into hatred with the inexorable logic of Greek drama. Empire crumbles. The year 1983 marked the beginning of the end for both the Gucci family business and Maurizio's marriage to Patrizia, as conflicts that had been simmering for decades finally erupted into open warfare that would destroy everything 3 generations had built together. The immediate catalyst was the death of Maurizio's father Rodolfo on May 15, 1983, which removed the last restraining influence on family members who had been planning to seize control of the company for their own benefit. Within hours of Rodolfo's funeral, Uncle Aldo launched a legal and financial assault designed to strip Maurizio of his inheritance and eliminate him as a threat to Aldo's vision of Gucci's future. The attack began with challenges to Rodolfo's will, which had left his 50% stake in Gucci to Maurizio, with the expectation that his son would continue the European operations while maintaining family unity. Aldo's lawyers argued that the will was invalid due to technical defects in its execution, while simultaneously filing lawsuits claiming that Maurizio lacked the experience and judgment necessary to manage a global luxury business. The legal strategy was designed to tie up Maurizio's inheritance in court proceedings that could last for years, while Aldo consolidated control over day-to-day operations. But the legal assault was accompanied by a more subtle campaign of financial pressure, designed to force Maurizio into a subordinate position within the company hierarchy. Aldo used his control over American operations, which generated nearly 60% of Gucci's revenue, to manipulate transfer pricing, licensing agreements, and profit distribution in ways that reduced the resources available to European operations. The strategy created cash flow problems that made it difficult for Maurizio to maintain the quality standards and expansion plans that his father had established. Maurizio's response to these attacks revealed both his strengths and weaknesses as a business leader. His aesthetic sophistication and cultural connections proved valuable in developing new product lines and marketing strategies that appealed to younger, more affluent customers who were driving growth in luxury markets. But his trust in family relationships and reluctance to engage in the kind of ruthless maneuvering that characterized corporate warfare made him vulnerable to more aggressive opponents who were willing to sacrifice family bonds for business advantage. The family conflicts played out against the backdrop of broader changes in global luxury markets that required strategic responses beyond the capabilities of a management structure paralyzed by internal warfare. Japanese consumers were emerging as major buyers of European luxury goods, while American markets were being transformed by the rise of department store retail chains that demanded different pricing and distribution strategies. Gucci's traditional approach of slow, careful expansion, based on maintaining exclusive relationships with independent retailers, was being challenged by competitors who embraced mass marketing and rapid global expansion. Patrizia's reaction to the family crisis revealed the calculating nature that had always underlain her romantic facade. Rather than supporting her husband through the most difficult period of his life, she began positioning herself to protect her own interests regardless of how the business conflicts resolved. Her social activities increasingly included wives of Aldo's supporters and business associates, while her spending patterns reflected determination to acquire portable assets that could survive potential financial collapse. The penthouse on Via Palestro became a strategic headquarters where Maurizio and his advisors planned responses to Aldo's attacks, but it also became a source of additional stress as mortgage payments, maintenance costs, and lifestyle expenses consumed resources that were desperately needed for legal battles and business operations. Patrizia's refusal to reduce spending or modify her social activities during this crisis period created additional financial pressure that weakened Maurizio's negotiating position with both family members and potential outside investors. The psychological toll of simultaneous family warfare and marital deterioration began to affect Maurizio's health and judgment in ways that further complicated his business situation. Friends and associates noticed that he had lost weight, was drinking more heavily, and showed signs of chronic stress that affected his ability to concentrate during important meetings. His doctors prescribed medications for anxiety and depression that improved his mood, but also reduced the aggressive instincts that might have helped him respond more effectively to Aldo's attacks. The crisis reached its climax in 1984, when Aldo's faction succeeded in gaining control of Gucci's board of directors and voted to remove Maurizio from all operational responsibility within the company. The coup was executed with surgical precision, using procedural technicalities and legal challenges to Rodolfo's will to justify actions that were clearly designed to eliminate the last independent voice within the family leadership structure. Maurizio retained his theoretical ownership stake, but he lost all practical ability to influence company decisions or protect his inheritance from further attacks. The immediate aftermath of this corporate coup was devastating for both Maurizio's financial position and his marriage to Patrizia. The income stream that had supported their luxurious lifestyle disappeared overnight, while legal expenses for challenging Aldo's actions consumed their remaining liquid assets with frightening speed. The penthouse that had been their pride and joy became a burden that they could barely afford to maintain, while the social obligations that had defined their identity became impossibly expensive to sustain. Patrizia's response to their reduced circumstances revealed the extent to which her love for Maurizio had always been conditional on his ability to provide the lifestyle she expected. Rather than adapting to their new financial reality, she continued spending at previous levels while pressuring Maurizio to find ways of recovering their lost income. Her demands for expensive clothing, jewelry, and entertainment expenses created constant tension that poisoned their interactions about every other subject. The couple's arguments about money became increasingly bitter and personal, as financial stress exposed fundamental differences in values and priorities that had been hidden during their years of prosperity. Maurizio's willingness to sacrifice material comfort for principle conflicted with Patrizia's determination to maintain her social position regardless of the cost. Their disagreements about budgeting, spending priorities, and lifestyle changes revealed that they had fundamentally different concepts of what marriage meant and what obligations spouses owed to each other during difficult times. The isolation imposed by their reduced circumstances also took a psychological toll on both partners. The social circle that had surrounded them during their wealthy years disappeared almost overnight, as friends and associates distanced themselves from a family that was no longer useful for business purposes or social advancement. The penthouse that had once been filled with guests and conversation became a lonely fortress where two people who no longer loved each other were trapped by financial obligations and social expectations. Maurizio's attempts to rebuild his business career were hampered by Aldo's continuing campaign to damage his reputation within the fashion industry and luxury business community. Potential employers and business partners were warned that hiring or investing with Maurizio would be viewed as hostile action against Gucci's legitimate leadership, while legal challenges to his competence and judgment made him appear to be a risky business associate. The combination of family warfare and industry blacklisting made it nearly impossible for him to generate the income needed to support his family's expenses. The psychological pressure of professional failure combined with marital conflict to create a downward spiral that affected every aspect of Maurizio's life. His relationship with his daughters became strained as financial stress reduced his ability to provide the educational opportunities and lifestyle experiences that he considered essential to their development. His health deteriorated further as chronic stress exacerbated problems with anxiety, depression, and alcohol consumption that made it even more difficult to develop effective responses to his business and personal challenges. Patrizia's increasing hostility toward her husband manifested itself in verbal attacks that grew more personal and vicious as their financial situation deteriorated. The woman who had once admired his aesthetic sophistication and cultural intelligence now criticized these same qualities as evidence of his impractical nature and inability to provide for his family. Her complaints about his business failures, personal weakness, and failure as a husband created an emotional environment that made the penthouse feel like a war zone rather than a family home. The breaking point came in late 1985, when Maurizio discovered that Patrizia had been secretly negotiating with Aldo's representatives about potential financial support in exchange for information about her husband's business activities and legal strategies. The betrayal revealed that his wife had been preparing for their marriage's end while maintaining the appearance of loyalty and support. The discovery destroyed whatever trust remained between them and convinced Maurizio that their relationship could not be salvaged. But even as their marriage collapsed around them, both Maurizio and Patrizia remained. Trapped in the penthouse by financial obligations, social expectations, and concern for their daughter's welfare. Neither could afford to establish a separate household, while divorce proceedings would require legal expenses they could not afford and would expose their financial difficulties to public scrutiny that could damage their daughter's future prospects. The beautiful space that had been designed to celebrate their love had become a prison where two people who had grown to hate each other were condemned to coexist until one of them found a way to escape. The empire that had taken 3 generations to build was crumbling, and the marriage that had been built on its foundation was crumbling with it. The stage was set for the final tragedy that would transform personal failure into criminal conspiracy, as love curdled into hatred with the inexorable logic of a Greek tragedy played out in Italian marble and Persian silk. Final betrayal. By 1987, the penthouse on Via Palestro had become a battlefield where Maurizio and Patrizia waged psychological warfare with the same intensity that had once characterized their romantic passion. The space that had been designed for entertaining Milan's elite now echoed with accusations, threats, and recriminations that grew more venomous as their financial situation continued to deteriorate. The couple who had once been celebrated as Italy's golden pair were now locked in a marriage that neither could escape, but that both had come to view as a form of mutual torture. Maurizio's decision to seek legal separation in early 1987 represented his first attempt to break free from a relationship that had become psychologically unbearable, but it also triggered Patrizia's transformation from bitter wife into implacable enemy. Her reaction to the separation papers revealed depths of rage and vindictiveness that shocked even those who had witnessed the gradual deterioration of their marriage. The woman who had once proclaimed her eternal love for the Gucci heir now spoke of him with hatred that seemed to consume every other emotion she possessed. The legal proceedings exposed the full extent of their financial collapse and the degree to which their luxurious lifestyle had been built on debt rather than sustainable income. Court documents revealed that their monthly expenses exceeded 100 million lire, while their actual income had fallen to less than 30 million lire after Maurizio's removal from Gucci operations. The penthouse carried mortgage obligations of 15 million lire monthly, while staff salaries, maintenance costs, and property taxes added another 20 million lire to their fixed expenses. Patrizia's response to these financial realities demonstrated her complete refusal to accept any reduction in her lifestyle or social status. Rather than cooperating with efforts to reduce expenses or liquidate assets, she hired expensive lawyers to fight for maximum alimony payments and property settlements that would maintain her accustomed standard of living. Her demands included continued exclusive use of the penthouse, monthly support payments of 50 million lire, and retention of jewelry, artwork, and other luxury items worth hundreds of millions of lire. The separation negotiations became a proxy war for broader questions about blame and responsibility for their failed marriage and financial collapse. Patrizia's lawyers argued that Maurizio's incompetence and business failures had destroyed a fortune that rightfully belonged to her and their daughters, while Maurizio's representatives contended that her extravagance and refusal to adapt to changed circumstances had made their financial problems inevitable. The legal battles consumed resources that neither party could afford, while poisoning any possibility of civilized coexistence. The psychological impact of the separation on their daughters, Alessandra and Allegra, created additional complications that intensified the bitterness between their parents. Both children were old enough to understand that their family's life was disintegrating, but too young to comprehend the financial and business forces that had created their parents' conflicts. Their confusion and distress became weapons that each parent used against the other, with accusations of psychological damage and inadequate care adding personal venom to already contentious legal proceedings. Maurizio's attempt to rebuild his life away from the penthouse and his failed marriage was hampered by the continued presence of Patrizia and the practical impossibilities of maintaining separate households when their combined expenses already exceeded their income. His efforts to rent a smaller apartment were frustrated by his damaged credit and the legal uncertainties surrounding his property rights, while Patrizia's refusal to cooperate with asset sales made it impossible to generate the cash needed for new living arrangements. The claustrophobic atmosphere created by their forced coexistence in the penthouse intensified the psychological warfare between them. Patrizia used her continued presence to monitor Maurizio's activities, interfere with his attempts to develop new business relationships, and maintain pressure for financial concessions that he was unable to provide. Her surveillance of his phone calls, mail, and social activities created an environment of constant tension that made the luxurious penthouse feel like a beautiful prison. The discovery of Maurizio's romantic relationship with Paola Francia in 1990 provided Patrizia with both emotional devastation and strategic opportunity in their continuing legal battles. Paola was an interior designer from a respectable Milanese family whose sophisticated appearance and cultural interests made her seem like an ideal partner for the former Gucci heir. But her presence in Maurizio's life also gave Patrizia concrete evidence of betrayal that she could use to justify her demands for punitive financial settlements and exclusive custody of their daughters. Patrizia's reaction to the revelation of Maurizio's new relationship revealed the depth of her psychological investment in her identity as his wife and her terror at the prospect of losing the social status that marriage had provided. Her threats of violence against both Maurizio and Paola were initially dismissed as emotional outbursts from a woman under extreme stress, but they actually represented the beginning of a psychological transformation that would ultimately lead to murder. The final separation in 1991, when Maurizio moved out of the penthouse to establish a household with Paola, should have provided relief for both parties after years of destructive cohabitation. But Patrizia's response was to escalate her campaign of harassment and intimidation in ways that made normal life impossible for her estranged husband. Her tactics included threatening phone calls, surveillance of his activities, attempts to sabotage his business relationships, and legal challenges to every aspect of their separation agreement. The penthouse became Patrizia's fortress and command center for psychological warfare that extended far beyond normal divorce proceedings. She used her continued residence there to maintain the appearance of being the legitimate Mrs. Gucci, while conducting a campaign designed to destroy Maurizio's reputation and business prospects. Her extensive social connections among Milan's wealthy elite provided intelligence about his activities and opportunities to spread damaging rumors about his character and competence. The legal strategy that Patrizia pursued through her divorce proceedings revealed sophisticated understanding of how to use Italy's family law system to maximize financial pressure on her estranged husband. Her lawyers filed motions demanding immediate financial support while simultaneously challenging the validity of their separation agreement, creating legal expenses that consumed whatever resources Maurizio had been able to preserve. The strategy was designed to force him into bankruptcy or capitulation, regardless of the merits of her claims. But the most dangerous aspect of Patrizia's campaign was her growing involvement with elements of Milan's criminal underworld through her associations with fortune tellers, mystics, and spiritual advisors who promised supernatural solutions to her problems. These relationships, which began as desperate attempts to find emotional support during her marital crisis, gradually evolved into connections that would provide access to people willing to commit violence for money. The transformation of Patrizia from scorned wife to potential murderess was facilitated by her complete inability to accept the loss of her identity as Mrs. Gucci and the social status that had defined her existence for nearly 2 decades. Her threats against Maurizio and Paola grew more specific and detailed as her psychological state deteriorated under the pressure of financial stress, social embarrassment, and romantic rejection. The penthouse that had been the stage for their fairy tale romance now became the planning center for the final act of their domestic tragedy. The same rooms where they had once entertained European royalty and international celebrities now echoed with conversations about surveillance, intimidation, and ultimately murder. The beautiful space that had been designed to celebrate their love would witness the planning of the crime that would destroy whatever remained of the Gucci family legacy. The boy from humble origins who had inherited a great name was about to discover that some betrayals could never be forgiven, and some enemies could never be appeased. The woman who had once promised to love him until death parted them was preparing to ensure that death would come sooner than anyone expected. Murder morning. March 27, 1995, dawned gray and cold across Milan, with the kind of persistent drizzle that made the city's marble facades glisten like tears. At 8:15 a.m., Maurizio Gucci emerged from the apartment he shared with Paola Francia on Corso Venezia, carrying his usual brown leather Hermes briefcase and wearing the navy cashmere overcoat that had become his signature during Milan's unpredictable spring weather. His destination was the Via Palestro 20 building that still housed his business offices on the 7th floor, one floor below the penthouse where he had once lived with Patrizia and their daughters. The irony of conducting business in the same building where his failed marriage had played out its final act was not lost on Maurizio, but practical considerations had forced him to maintain the office lease even after moving out of the penthouse. The space provided a prestigious business address that was essential for his attempts to rebuild his career, while the building's security and exclusive atmosphere offered protection from the harassment that had characterized Patrizia's behavior since their separation. The morning routine of arriving at Via Palestro had become a symbol of his determination to reclaim his professional life despite the personal wreckage of his marriage. The building's doorman, Giuseppe Onorato, greeted Maurizio with the formal courtesy that characterized interactions between residents and staff in Milan's most exclusive neighborhoods. Their brief exchange about the weather and weekend plans revealed nothing unusual about Maurizio's mood or behavior that morning. He appeared relaxed and optimistic about business meetings scheduled for the day, including discussions with potential investors who might provide capital for new ventures he was developing in the luxury goods sector. But surveillance cameras later revealed that Maurizio's arrival at the building had been observed by a man in a dark coat who had positioned himself across the street with clear views of the entrance. The watcher's presence was not unusual. Via Palestro's concentration of wealthy residents made it a regular target for criminals seeking opportunities. But the systematic nature of his observation suggested planning that went beyond random street crime. The man maintained his position for nearly 20 minutes after Maurizio entered the building, apparently confirming that the target's morning routine was proceeding as expected. At 8:30 a.m., Maurizio took the elevator to his 7th floor office, where he spent 90 minutes reviewing financial documents, making phone calls to potential business partners, and preparing for a lunch meeting with investors who were considering funding his plans for a new luxury leather goods company. His secretary, Ivana Saviani, later remembered that he seemed particularly energetic and optimistic that morning, discussing expansion plans and marketing strategies with the enthusiasm that had characterized his most creative periods during the early years at Gucci. The phone call that ended Maurizio's life came at exactly 8:27 a.m. on March 27, 1995, though its significance would not become apparent until much later. The caller identified himself as a potential investor interested in meeting that morning to discuss financing opportunities, suggesting a meeting in the building lobby before proceeding to a nearby restaurant for more detailed negotiations. Maurizio's eagerness to pursue new business opportunities overcame his usual caution about unscheduled meetings, and he agreed to come downstairs immediately. The elevator descended from the 7th floor with its usual Swiss precision, delivering Maurizio to the marble-floored lobby where he expected to meet a businessman, but instead encountered his assassin. The killer had been waiting behind a marble column that provided concealment from the building's security cameras while offering clear shots at anyone emerging from the elevator. His position demonstrated intimate knowledge of the building's layout and security blind spots that could only have been provided by someone with extensive inside information. The first shot struck Maurizio in the back as he walked across the lobby toward where he expected to find his supposed business contact. The impact spun him around, bringing him face to face with his killer for a moment that security cameras captured in horrifying detail. The second and third shots were fired at close range into his chest and neck, ensuring that any possibility of survival was eliminated with the professional efficiency that characterized organized crime executions. Maurizio fell backward against the elevator doors, his blood spreading across marble that had been quarried from the same Italian mountains that had provided stone for Renaissance cathedrals. The briefcase he had carried to thousands of business meetings scattered its contents: financial documents, business cards, photographs of his daughters, across a growing crimson stain that marked the end of a life that had encompassed both extraordinary privilege and devastating loss. The killer's escape was as professionally executed as the murder itself. Rather than fleeing immediately, he calmly walked to the building's rear exit, where a motorcycle was waiting with its engine running. The driver's identity was concealed by a helmet, but surveillance footage from nearby buildings later revealed that the escape route had been carefully planned to avoid major intersections and traffic cameras that might have provided identifiable images. Giuseppe Onorado's discovery of the body 8 minutes later triggered emergency responses that filled the elegant building with police officers, paramedics, and forensic specialists, whose presence transformed Milan's most exclusive residential address into a crime scene. The building's wealthy residents gathered in the lobby to witness a spectacle that shattered their assumptions about security and privilege in contemporary Italy. The marble floors that had been designed to impress visitors with their luxury were now marked by chalk outlines and evidence markers that told a story of calculated revenge. The immediate police response focused on robbery as the most likely motive, but the killer's failure to take Maurizio's expensive watch, briefcase, or wallet suggested more personal motivations. Detective Filippo Ninni, who arrived at the scene within 20 minutes of the murder, immediately recognized that the professional execution and planned escape indicated organized crime involvement rather than random street violence. His initial report described the killing as a contract murder executed with military precision by individuals with extensive knowledge of the victim's routines and the building's security systems. News of Maurizio Gucci's assassination spread through Milan's fashion and business communities with shocking speed, creating panic among other high-profile figures who suddenly recognized their own vulnerability to similar attacks. The murder of such a prominent member of Italian society in one of the city's most secure buildings demonstrated that wealth and social status provided no protection against determined enemies with access to professional killers. The investigation that began that morning would eventually reveal a conspiracy that reached from Milan's criminal underworld to the penthouse, where Maurizio had once shared his dreams of building a fashion empire with the woman who would orchestrate his destruction. The marble floors of Via Paolstro 20 had witnessed the final scene of a tragedy that began with love and ended with calculated murder. Blood legacy. Today, the penthouse at Via Paolstro 20 stands as a monument to the tragic intersection of love, ambition, and revenge that defined one of Italy's most shocking crimes. The 800-square-meter duplex remains one of Milan's most prestigious residential addresses, its floor-to-ceiling windows still offering the same panoramic views across cathedral spires and alpine foothills that once enchanted Maurizio and Patrizia during the golden years of their marriage. But the luxury that once symbolized fairy tale romance has been forever stained by the blood that pooled on marble floors 8 stories below. The immediate aftermath of Maurizio's murder transformed the building from an exclusive residential address into a crime scene and media circus. Police cordoned off the lobby for 6 days, while forensic specialists documented every detail of the assassination, their chalk outlines and evidence markers creating grotesque contrast with architectural details that had cost millions of lire to install. International media outlets established headquarters in nearby buildings, training telephoto lenses on the penthouse windows, where Patrizia Reggiani maintained residence while proclaiming her innocence and grief. Patrizia's performance during the investigation revealed both her sophisticated understanding of media manipulation and her complete lack of genuine remorse for her husband's murder. Her public appearances combined theatrical displays of widowhood with barely concealed satisfaction at having eliminated the man who had dared to reject her. She wore black Gucci dresses to television interviews where she wept for cameras, while simultaneously suggesting that Maurizio's business failures and romantic betrayals had made his violent death inevitable. The investigation that ultimately exposed Patrizia's role in the murder conspiracy consumed 2 years and revealed a plot worthy of the darkest Italian crime novels. Detective Filippo Ninni's methodical reconstruction of the conspiracy traced financial payments from Swiss bank accounts controlled by Patrizia to a network of hired killers recruited through Milan's network of fortune tellers and spiritual advisors. The woman who had once been celebrated for her sophisticated taste in luxury goods had applied the same attention to detail to arranging professional assassination. The trial that began in 1998 provided Italian media with a perfect combination of high society scandal, family betrayal, and organized crime that dominated headlines for months. Patrizia's courtroom appearances became fashion shows where she displayed designer clothing and expensive jewelry while describing her former husband's alleged failures as businessman, father, and husband. Her testimony revealed complete inability to accept responsibility for the murder, while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of how to manipulate public sympathy through claims of abandonment and financial desperation. The evidence against Patrizia proved overwhelming despite her expensive legal team's attempts to shift blame to co-conspirators and hired killers who had actually carried out the assassination. Recorded conversations revealed her active participation in planning surveillance operations that tracked Maurizio's daily routines, while financial records documented payments to criminal associates who had provided weapons and logistical support for the murder. Her conviction on charges of ordering her husband's murder resulted in a 26-year prison sentence that effectively ended her reign as one of Milan's most prominent socialites. The penthouse itself became a contested asset during legal proceedings that determined distribution of what remained of Maurizio's estate. Patrizia's criminal conviction invalidated her claims to property acquired during their marriage, while mortgage obligations and legal expenses had eliminated most of the equity that had once made the residence so valuable. The space that had cost over 3 billion lire to purchase and renovate was eventually sold for less than its outstanding debts, marking the final collapse of dreams that had once seemed unlimited. The new owners of the penthouse undertook extensive renovations designed to eliminate any traces of its tragic history and restore the space to its original function as luxury residential accommodation. The Venetian glass chandeliers, Persian rugs, and contemporary art collection that had reflected Maurizio and Patrizia's sophisticated taste were replaced with more conventional decor that appealed to international buyers seeking prestigious Milan addresses without complicated histories. The rooms where Europe's elite had once gathered for sophisticated dinner parties were redesigned to accommodate modern technology and contemporary lifestyle preferences. But the building's lobby retained the marble floors where Maurizio died, their elegant patterns now serving as an unintended memorial to the man who had inherited everything and lost it all through a combination of family betrayal and romantic miscalculation. The bronze elevator doors still reflect light across surfaces that were stained with blood during those terrible minutes on March 27, 1995. Though few residents or visitors are aware of the tragedy that transformed their luxury building into a crime scene. The broader impact of Maurizio's murder extended far beyond the immediate family to encompass the entire luxury fashion industry that had been built around the Gucci name. His death marked the effective end of family control over the company that bore their name, as surviving relatives lacked both the financial resources and business expertise needed to maintain independence in an increasingly competitive global market. The brand that had symbolized Italian excellence for decades became a corporate asset traded between international conglomerates that valued its marketing potential over its artistic heritage. Maurizio and Patrizia's daughters, Alessandra and Allegra, inherited not wealth and social status, but the psychological trauma of their parents' destruction and the social stigma of their mother's criminal conviction. Their childhood memories of the penthouse were forever corrupted by knowledge that the same woman who had taught them to appreciate beauty and culture had orchestrated their father's murder with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her interior design projects. The cultural impact of the Gucci murder trial extended beyond crime reporting to encompass broader questions about wealth, privilege, and moral responsibility in contemporary Italian society. Patrizia's transformation from social climber to convicted murderer provided a perfect metaphor for the corruption that critics argued had infected Italy's entire economic and social system during the turbulent 1990s. Her story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of confusing material success with personal worth and romantic love with financial security. The penthouse where their story began and ended serves as a physical reminder that even extreme luxury cannot protect against the human capacity for betrayal and violence. The spectacular views that once inspired dreams of unlimited happiness now overlook a city where love stories can become murder plots with the same inexorable logic that transforms great families into criminal conspiracies. The marble floors that had been designed to impress visitors with their beauty were ultimately stained with blood that tells a story older than Italy itself. Standing today at the bronze elevator doors of Via Paolstro 20, looking across marble that has been cleaned of bloodstains but cannot be cleansed of memory, visitors might reflect on the price of confusing material luxury with spiritual fulfillment. The boy from humble origins who inherited a great name discovered too late that some betrayals cannot be survived, while the woman who married for money learned that love cannot be purchased or preserved through violence. The penthouse above remains beautiful, expensive, and exclusive, but it can never again be innocent. The fairy tale that began with such promise ended with calculated murder, transforming a symbol of Italian luxury into a monument to the human capacity for evil. The walls that were designed to protect privacy became barriers that concealed conspiracy, while the beauty that was meant to inspire admiration serves only to remind us that aesthetic sophistication cannot compensate for moral failure. The invisible hand of justice ultimately caught those responsible for Maurizio's murder, but it could not resurrect the dreams that died with him, or restore the innocence that was lost when love transformed into hatred. The penthouse stands as testament to the truth that no amount of luxury can protect against the consequences of human choice, and no walls can be built high enough to keep out the darkness that lives within us all. That is the dark story of Maurizio Gucci's Milan penthouse.